Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're peeling back the layers on a topic that's constantly evolving and, well, it impacts us all, the future of feminism.
Hmm.
We've got a great stack of material guiding us specifically, a fascinating article from Vox that gathers perspectives from five, leading feminist thinkers, and also a global snapshot from a project by the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung.
And our goal here is to really try and get past the headlines, to
Yeah.
understand the different directions this movement is actually headed,
Yeah.
the big challenges it faces, and the powerful, sometimes surprising visions shaping its path forward.
Think of this as your shortcut to being genuinely informed on where feminism is going, uncovering key insights on everything from, say, climate change to funding challenges to totally new ways of thinking about power.
Right. Let's unpack this.
So jumping right in, our sources immediately acknowledge that figuring out exactly what wave of feminism we're in. Well, it's a bit debated these days.
Yeah, that comes up a lot.
But they highlight something undeniable. Terms like white feminism aren't just, niche academic concepts anymore.
No, not at all.
They've moved into the mainstream conversation, forcing a closer look at who feminism has historically served and, frankly, who's been left out.
That's a really crucial starting point. And while acknowledging significant progress over decades, the sources aren't ignoring those wins. They really underscore that fundamental challenges persist.
Definitely.
We're still wrestling with things like the wage gap, right? Fighting battles over reproductive rights in many places and confronting ongoing issues of harassment and assault. It's still very present.
And the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung source adds a really sobering global context to this.
Hmm.
They point out that despite important successes, the struggle against depression isn't just continuing, it's actually intensifying in many parts of the world.
Yes, and they link this directly to a significant pushback from conservative and right-wing forces globally. The FES project notes that questions around gender have become kind of a central battleground, a flashpoint in current political confrontations worldwide.
Wow.
It's moved from being maybe just a social concern to a major political one.
Okay, that definitely sets the scene. Now, the Vox article gives us this front row seat to some potential futures by presenting five distinct visions from individual feminists.
Yeah.
These aren't necessarily a single unified manifesto, right?
Yeah.
But rather powerful, sometimes provocative ideas about what the movement must prioritize next.
And what's fascinating here is how these visions, while they're unique to each thinker, also reveal some converging priorities.
Absolutely.
Right.
Let's start with Mickey Kendall. Her vision is fundamentally about centering those who have been marginalized, even like within feminist spaces.
Mm.
She wants a future feminism where considering the impact of any proposed policy on women in every single community, not just, say, wealthy white women, is the automatic standard practice.
She makes such a powerful case that policy should be intersectional by default. That means the first question, the primary concern when crafting policy should be, what's the impact on those with the least privilege?
The fewest resources.
Exactly.
And to make this concrete, she lists examples of issues she argues mainstream feminism absolutely must engage with.
Yeah.
And these aren't always what immediately comes to mind for everyone when they think feminism.
Right. Like what?
Things like protesting police brutality, opposing cuts to food aid, supporting the decriminalization of sex work,
Important ones.
advocating for immigration policies that aren't rooted in cruelty or racism, honoring indigenous treaties, demanding disability rights, and engaging directly in labor activism.
Right. The insight there, I think, is that her list isn't just random. It's a demonstration of how deeply interconnected these struggles actually are.
Yes.
And that a feminism focused only on maybe corporate boardrooms, it misses the core fight for equality and safety for all women, particularly those at the intersections of multiple forms of oppression.
It's really about making those on the margins the center of policy consideration.
Precisely.
Okay, next up, Samhita Mukhopadhyay. She paints this picture of our current moment as a time of, striking extremes.
Yeah, it does feel that way sometimes.
On one hand, you have figures like Rihanna as global icons.
Right.
On the other, we haven't had a woman in the highest political office.
Right.
We're told we can have it all, while the persistent reality of the wage gap just continues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. She highlights those ongoing foundational issues, too, like access to basic sanitary products, the battles over reproductive health care access
Still happen.
in various places, and the constant, pervasive threat of harassment and assault. But a major focus for her future vision, and something she sees as critically underaddressed by a lot of mainstream feminism, is climate change.
And she's really clear. Climate change is a gendered issue. It disproportionately affects women, even though it's often discussed in these sort of gender-neutral terms.
Exactly. The source gives specific reasons why. Women are significantly more vulnerable to displacement from climate-related disasters. It cites a statistic that 80% of those displaced globally are women.
80%, wow.
Yeah. Women farmers in the global south bear the brunt when crops fail due to changing weather patterns. And women suffer greater consequences from climate-linked diseases like, remember the Zika outbreak.
Yes. So for her, it's logical that the future leaders of feminism are women and girls already on the front lines of the climate crisis.
Makes sense.
People like Greta Thunberg, Jamie Margolin, She Batista, grassroots groups like the Sunrise Movement, indigenous organizers fighting resource extraction, and those women farmers in the global south.
She even includes that really powerful quote from Vandana Riva that just drives the point home.
Right.
We are either going to have a future where women lead the way to make peace with the earth, or we are not going to have a human future at all.
That's stark.
It is, and that quote kind of encapsulates her insight that addressing the climate crisis isn't just an issue for feminism, it's potentially the defining issue for human survival, with women playing a lead role.
Okay, Ai-jen Poo. She brings a perspective deeply informed by her work in organizing, particularly with domestic workers.
Right, a really important voice.
She offers this sharp critique of traditional, often male-dominated politics, describing it as frequently operating on a zero-sum mentality.
That idea that power is finite.
Yeah, like for me to gain power, someone else has to lose it. She calls this an illusion of scarcity.
And her powerful lesson comes from the movement she's been part of, largely made up of domestic workers who are predominantly women of color. She's seen firsthand how they build power with each other, not by taking it from others. Their movement is described as incredibly expansive, multiracial, multilingual, multi-generational. It's a different model of collective power building.
So her vision is about fundamentally shifting how we even think about power, moving beyond any kind of domination, whether male or female, towards systems based on abundance.
Abundance, right. Where power isn't a pie to be divided, but something that can be built and shared collaboratively.
This is where she connects to that idea of shine theory, coined by Anne Friedman and Aminatou Sow.
I don't shine if you don't shine.
Exactly. The core insight here is that supporting and lifting up others doesn't diminish your own standing. It actually multiplies collective power and potential.
It's a fundamental rejection of that zero-sum game, isn't it?
Totally. The goal for her is a world where everyone can truly reach their full potential, where every worker is valued, including the care workers and domestic workers who make it possible for others, including professional women, to even go to work.
Yeah. It's a vision of valuing contribution and shared prosperity over the old model of just competing for scarce power. Okay, now, Carmen Rojas. Her vision is for a future feminism that can truly hold the whole of me. That's how she puts it.
I like that phrase.
Yeah. For her, intersectionality isn't just a concept. It's the lived reality of being, feminist, Latina, queer, and progressive. It's the starting point, not an add-on.
Her perspective is just inextricably linked to the experiences of Black, Latinx, Asian, and Native communities, informed by the politics of liberation, sovereignty, belonging, and the messy, vital work of movement building.
And she brings up a really practical but absolutely crucial challenge for the movement: how feminism is funded. Always the money. She voices concern that the majority of funding still flows to larger, often white-led or wealthier organizations.
Okay.
And critically, she notes that funders often like the idea of belonging in diverse networks, but maybe don't actually support or fund diverse leadership and boards for them groups.
That's a key distinction. This concern about who gets funded directly relates to her insight about needing to dramatically expand the feminist agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. It's vital to fight for, say, a woman president and abortion rights, yes. But the agenda must also include things like the disproportionate mortality rates for Black mothers in healthcare.
Which is shocking.
Shocking. The urgent need for political representation of Native and Asian women, protecting trans women who face just incredible violence, and addressing the stark Latino wage gap. She notes it takes Latinas 23 months to earn what a white man earns in just 12.
23 months.
Yeah.
It's a huge gap there.
Yeah. So for her, the future of feminism isn't separate from other justice movements. It's a core, integrated part of broader struggles for economic opportunity, political power, representation for all.
It sounds like it's about fiercely protecting the most vulnerable,
Yes.
holding those who create unsafe conditions accountable, while also daring to imagine and build entirely new systems, a democracy and an economy that truly works for everyone.
And finally, Jacqueline Friedman offers a very direct, challenging perspective, particularly aimed at white feminists. Her core argument, her central insight really, is that the absolute priority, the core project for white feminists right now, must be dismantling white supremacy.
That's a strong statement.
It is. She states unequivocally that no form of feminism is truly valid or complete if it doesn't prioritize the liberation of women of color.
Hmm.
She makes the stark point that white supremacy isn't just a system of racial oppression, it's fundamentally built on the subjugation of women, particularly women of color. She cites historical and ongoing examples like forced sterilization, horrific disparities in childbirth mortality rates, systemic violence.
Right. And she articulates what she sees as this crucial problem, the bargain many white women have made.
It's a bargain. Tell me more.
This bargain, as she describes it, is basically co-signing or tacitly accepting white supremacy in exchange for a kind of reflected power or perceived protection from white men.
Okay.
And white women, she argues, often use this limited power against people of color and LGBTQ plus individuals.
The provocative insight of that bargain idea is her challenge to the narrative that white men are protectors of white women.
Right. Because
Statistically, drawing on realities of violence, she argues that white men are often the greatest danger to women, including white women.
so her call to action is powerful and direct. White feminists must take on a disproportionate share of the difficult labor required to dismantle white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
She urges white women to consciously break this historical pact with white supremacist patriarchy, to recognize that white men will not treat them as equals, to withdraw their consent to be governed by systems built by and for white men, and crucially, to follow and join the women of color who are already leading the way in these fights.
A very clear call to action there. So shifting gears now, the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung project. It broadens our lens to the global feminist landscape, showing how these ideas kind of resonate and manifest worldwide.
Right, taking it global.
Yeah. Their work is specifically focused on collaborating with feminist movements and activists across the globe.
They reinforce that, at its heart, feminism is a movement that challenges oppressive societal norms and tirelessly fights for justice, building on the legacy of those who fought for human dignity and equality before.
Absolutely. And the FES source highlights several prominent and powerful recent global feminist protest movements that have really captured international attention, like Ni Una Menos in Latin America, which started as a protest against femicide, hashtag Total Shutdown in South Africa, specifically targeting violence against women, and the more digitally driven but globally impactful movements like hashtag Me Too and hashtag Time's Up.
Right, those were huge.
Huge. And these aren't isolated incidents. They show a widespread active resistance happening on the ground.
Their project also has a significant focus on the future of work, looking at it through a feminist lens, especially concerning the impacts of digitalization on women's labor globally.
Yeah, that's key. They emphasize that economic disadvantage remains one of the most significant and persistent forms of inequality for women worldwide.
Still a massive issue.
It is, and this is a core area they are working to address, connecting feminist analyses with labor rights perspectives.
The project delves into specific thematic areas within this global economic focus, like analyzing and advocating around care work and social reproduction, the unpaid labor often done by women that keeps societies running.
Essential work.
Proposing feminist alternatives to traditional, often exploitative development models, and developing a framework to ensure digitalization doesn't leave women behind or, make inequalities worse.
And a key part of their strategy, a real insight into global movement building, I think, is actively connecting feminist activists with worker movements around the world.
Building bridges.
Exactly. Fostering those alliances, particularly drawing strength and perspectives from regions like Africa, Asia, and Pacific, MONA, which stands for the Middle East and North Africa and Latin America and Caribbean. It's about building global solidarity across different types of struggle.
Okay, let's try to pull some of these threads together. Listening to these distinct voices from the Vox article and looking at the global analysis from the FES, what are the big common themes or core insights that emerge about the future of feminism?
Well, it feels pretty undeniable that intersectionality, understanding and addressing how race, class, gender, sexuality, ability, all these factors intertwine to create unique experiences of oppression and privilege.
It's not just a buzzword.
No, it's not just part of the future of feminism. It seems absolutely central to it. The idea of a singular women's experience is just clearly insufficient now.
Right, and there's a very strong thread across many of these perspectives about challenging fundamental existing power structures, not just patriarchy, but also white supremacy, and that ingrained political model of a zero-sum game.
Where one group's gain must mean another's loss.
Yeah, that keeps coming up.
We also see a clear recognition, especially from the FES project and Mukhopadhyay's point on climate, of the global and interconnected nature of feminist struggles.
And the need for international alliances and solutions.
These aren't just local fights anymore, if they ever were.
And pressing issues of economic justice, how we define and value work, especially care work, navigating the future of labor in a digital age, and critically confronting climate change. These are identified repeatedly as essential, non-negotiable priorities that feminism really has to tackle head-on.
So for you, our listener, who's showing you the richness and complexity of the movement, helping you see the world with a more nuanced, multi-layered perspective, just like we promised at the start.
So what does all this mean, really? Where does it leave us?
It's clear the future of feminism isn't walking down one single predictable path. That seems obvious.
Yeah, definitely not.
It's a vibrant, often messy, multifaceted movement. It's defined by its increasing commitment to intersectionality, by confronting these massive global challenges like climate change and economic inequality,
Those challenges.
and by employing diverse, strategic ways of building power, whether that's through protest in the streets, shaping public policy, or fundamentally redefining what we even value as important contributions to society.
Exactly. It's incredibly dynamic, constantly adapting and evolving, driven by the very real lived experiences and bold visions of people around the world.
And what's fascinating here, I think, is how these different voices, coming from distinct places and focusing on different priorities, still seem to circle back to those core questions, don't they?
Right.
Like, who is truly included? Who benefits from the current systems? And how do we build a future that is genuinely equitable for everyone, moving beyond the old restrictive models of power?
So for you, the listener, reflecting on everything we've discussed, from the urgent calls to dismantle white supremacy to the focus on climate justice, from challenges in funding to entirely new ways of building power like that shine theory. But perhaps the most provocative thought to carry away is this. If the future lies in shifting from a zero-sum game mindset to one focused on abundance and building power with others, how might that fundamental shift change the way you approach progress?
Yeah.
Not just in thinking about feminism, but in any challenge or struggle for a better world.
That's something worth pondering for sure. We hope this deep dive has provided you with a really solid foundation for understanding some of the most important conversations shaping the future of feminism.